In this unit, we will learn how to use the brush tool. We already learned a similar tool, the pen tool, but it sometimes feels a bit too technical. On the other hand, the brush tool allows us to freely express ourselves. It allows us to draw as we would draw in the physical world using a pen or a brush. If you have a drawing tablet connected to your computer, it might feel easier and a bit more natural to draw. Let's go! The brush tool is right here on your toolbar, and it allows you to use it just by clicking, dragging your click, and release it once you are finished with your path. As you see now, it doesn't really allow me to use it since I brought in the sketch that I created and I locked the layer that I placed it. So I'm gonna create a new layer and call it illustration, where I'm actually gonna trace this cow illustration and create a new one. I don't need to follow perfectly the path that exists here. I can always amend it, but it's always good, especially in the beginning when you're using the tools, to have your sketch that you can further edit later on. It's important to use both the pen tool and the brush tool because they have slightly different functions. The brush tool is really good whenever you want to achieve sketchy kind of wobbly lines, while the pen tool allows you to do detailed, perfect shapes. And the other difference is that the shapes created with the brush tool have quite a lot of anchor points, more than you actually need. So it makes it harder to further adjust the shapes. My favorite one is usually the pen tool, and it's the tool that most of the creatives are using, but the brush tool allows me to do a bit more sketchy kind of illustrations, so it really depends on what I want to achieve. I'm gonna hide the sketch layer so I can actually see the illustration, and grab my white arrow to further adjust the lines. It's important to work on the details and make sure that everything is nicely aligned together. I'm just selecting the anchor points, and I can select them and actually join them, which is good in order to be able to easily recolor my shape later. Or with my pen tool, I can also remove some anchor points or add them if I need to, and so on. Just connecting a few more anchor points together. I'm not gonna need this one since it's hidden behind the shape. The pen tool is working in collaboration with the brush tool sometimes. It's not that you need to pick one or the other, you can always use both of them in order to create an outcome. I'm gonna also cut with my scissors this line here since I don't really need it, and I'm gonna delete it with backspace or delete button. Perfect, so that's quite interesting. It looks like wobbly, a bit weird, but it gives quite a lot of character to the illustration when it's not perfect. What I'm gonna do next is explore the brush tool as a tool, what other functions it allows me to do. I'm gonna select the illustration, and as you're already aware of, you can either change the color or the stroke thickness, the stroke weight, from the properties panel here at the top. You can also change the width of your line, especially if you're using the basic line. And you can also adjust the definition of the brush, so what kind of brush you want. The basic brushes are going to be visible already here, but if you want to further explore the brushes, you can click on the little icon here of the 3 books on the bottom left corner to access the brush libraries. And you see some existing ones. You can always save a new brush if you want to, which we're going to talk about it in a second. And you can access brushes that you already saved through the user-defined section. Let's have a look on the calligraphic. Just by clicking on the different thumbnails here of the different brushes, you can see the result live on your artboard. Another thing that you can do is remove the brush stroke just by clicking on this icon here, and you can access further options about the selected brush. I can amend the angle of it, which you can see live if you enable the preview option here, the roundness, and the size of it. Once you're happy, you just press OK, and the adjustments will be applied to your brush. So let's try to create our own brush. Actually, before that, let's color a bit this illustration to see also how you can actually use the brush rather than just an outline, also turning it into a shape just by switching the stroke to a fill. And I'm gonna use my swatches panel with some colors that I already saved here to actually color it. So again, I'm switching to a fill. With your eyedropper tool, you can also quickly select the color from another object. The eyedropper tool is the letter I on your keyboard, the shortcut. And switching back to my wide arrow with pressing the A letter to select the other shape. We will need actually to connect these two parts so we can close the shape. I'm going to select those two anchor points, right click and joint. Add an extra anchor point so I can move that a bit further up. Switching the fill to a stroke and the opposite, so switching the stroke to a fill and recoloring it. Perhaps this corner here is a bit too sharp, so I'm gonna use the anchor point tool to make it a bit more curvy here. Perfect. And should we also add the background color? And yeah, here is my illustration. I'm not really happy with this eye here, so I'm gonna get rid of that and perhaps duplicate the top one, which is a bit more interesting. The brush tool allows you to quickly and easily create any kind of illustration freely as you would do in a physical world. And we explored a few of the existing brushes, but let's go ahead and grab this eye, and I'm gonna right click and group it, duplicate it using the Alt key, and create a brush out of it. It's not only like that you can use an illustration, it can be an abstract kind of line or something that you created that you want to turn to a brush. The way to do that is go through Window to access the brushes panel. And you see the already existing brushes here, but what I can also do is grab the eye and drag and drop it on my brushes panel. It's gonna pop me up this panel, which gives me a few options, such as creating calligraphic brushes, which is creating strokes that resemble like those that been drawn with an angled point of a calligraphic pen, or scatter brushes, which they actually spread over a path some copies of your object, so it's gonna have like some clones of the eyes over a path. Or art brushes, the one underneath, which allows you to stretch a specific shape or object that you have over the length of a path, so it's gonna stretch the eye over the path. The bristle brush, which creates brush strokes that look like a natural brush with bristles. And last one, the pattern brush, which paints a pattern that repeats along the path. So what I want to do is actually creating a path that is full of copies of eyes. So I'm gonna go ahead and click OK. And this allows me to define a few different options, such as like the size, the spacing, the scatter, and the rotation if I want to. And once I'm happy with how I adjusted the brush, I can also name it like I1 perhaps. Press OK to create the brush. What I need now is to create a line, so I'm gonna go ahead, grab my brush tool and create a nice wobbly line. And you see how it already like added the eyes on the path. So it applied the brush. I can of course switch by clicking on the different brushes and explore the different options. The eyes, as you can see though, they are huge. What I can do is further amend my brush. Just by double clicking on that, I can reduce perhaps the size. So let's go ahead and make it 45%. And it asks me if I want to apply these amends to the paths that I already have or not. So I'm gonna press apply to strokes so I can see the outcome. The spacing as well is huge, so again I can double click and make the spacing less. Again, apply the strokes, and yeah, here we go. You can create really interesting brushes with simple objects such as like this eye, and then go ahead and draw any kind of shape and bring in those elements and create even like lovely patterns and compositions by using a brush that you just created. Feel free to further experiment using the brush tool and its various styles. Create your own brushes and save them along with your favorite ones so you can easily access them whenever a project comes in. In the next unit, let's play with the puppet tool.